Good job. You all quieted down so fast. You must be waiting on the edges of your seats to hear what our jurors have to say today. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Sarah. I'm the director here at MHC Gallery, and we are delighted to welcome jurors, artists, family, friends to the 93rd annual OJCE, which is a tongue twister, so I need to say it slowly. I'd like to start the evening with an acknowledgement that MHC Gallery is located on territory stewarded for generations by the Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, and Red River Métis people. The gallery sits on Treaty 1 lands where we access clean drinking water from Shoal Lake 39 and 40 in Treaty 3 territory and use hydropower generated on Treaty 5 territory. We benefit from these treaty relationships every day and are committed to living purposefully as we work towards reconciliation and building meaningful, lasting relationships with Indigenous people and with all creation. So I will introduce everyone in just a second, but a few quick housekeeping notes. Washrooms are located between the glass doors where you came in, or there's some downstairs as well if that one's occupied. And you probably noticed that works in the show are for sale. So if you want to purchase anything, they can purchase them tonight, yes. Yeah, you are welcome to see me and I can set you up with that. So yes, and of course there's some refreshments and things just in front of those glass doors that you're welcome to enjoy if you need some water or after the talks. So without further ado, I will introduce Cheryl Galarski, the chair of the OJCE and the vice president of the Manitoba Society of Artists. Cheryl.
A little taller. So we got a nice crowd tonight. So most of you I know. My name is Cheryl Galarski. I am the vice president of the MSA, also the chair of the 93rd 2025 Open Jury Competition and Exhibition. The MSA was founded in 1902. And in 1926, we held the first annual exhibition in the Richardson Brothers Gallery on Main Street. Since that time, except for a few years, the Society has sponsored this annual exhibition for Manitoba artists. The OJCE offers an opportunity for artists across Manitoba to exhibit their work in the company of their peers. This year's volunteers worked together to organize an exhibit that offered the opportunity to a wide array of Manitoba artists. We've been supported by a team of volunteers to shoulder the massive workload entailed in the selection process of a province-wide exhibit. Many MSA members have logged many hours to ensure the success of this show. A special thank you as well to Sarah Hodges, director of the MHC Gallery, for all her help and her organization. So this year we had over 90 artists and 220 works of art that were entered into the show. And I'd like to remind you that our awards night and the artist reception is going to be held on this Friday, the 18th, 7 o'clock here at the gallery. There'll also be a recording of tonight's lecture available on our Manitoba Society of Artists YouTube channel. So I'm not going to hold you up anymore. I'm just going to introduce our two jurors, Leona Herzog and Karen Cornelius. Leona graduated with a BFA honors in '75 and a Master of Arts with a focus on curatorial practices in 2012. As director-curator of the Buehler Gallery in St. Boniface Hospital, Winnipeg, from 2016 to 2022, she created over 25 notable exhibitions featuring the works of contemporary Canadian artists. Recent curatorial work includes Crafting Wellness, Mind and Body at a Cost at C2 Gallery for Manitoba Crafts Museum and Library, and Divergence and Connection at MHC Gallery, a juried exhibition for Flash Photographic Festival. An experienced juror, recent projects include adjudicating the 44th and 45th Annual Westman Juried Art Show, SAQA Studio Art Quilt Associates, 2024 National Quilt Exhibit Renewal, and the 2024 Icelandic Festival of Manitoba Arts Show. Leona has served on many arts boards, including Manitoba Opera, Manitoba Crafts Museum, and Library, and is currently chair of the board of directors for MAWA, Mentoring Artists for Women's Art, a national feminist arts organization. She volunteers with other organizations, including the Advisory Committee of Flash Photographic Festival and WIN Herbarium. Her art practice focuses primarily on botanical watercolors and fibers. Karen Cornelius has been working as a visual artist and exhibiting her work since graduating from Moore College of Art in Philadelphia. Her work is focused on place, belonging, and identity. She has exhibited her work in numerous solo and group exhibitions in Canada, the United States, Europe, Africa, Australia, and China. Her work has been purchased by the Canadian Art Bank, City of Ottawa, Province of Manitoba, Manitoba Hydro, Ernst & Young Collections, and is held in the National Archives of Canada and in corporate and private collections around the world. I'm now going to pass the floor over to these ladies, and there will be presentations, and then at the end, a question and answer period for all of you. And yeah, please remember there are refreshments there. Help yourselves. Have a great evening.
Thank you. All right. I'd just like to extend my thanks to the organizers for this exhibition, to Cheryl and Leaf and Mavis, and also special thanks to the volunteers, Angela and Genevieve and Andrew, who helped us with the jury process and brought us pieces and took them upstairs and brought them back down when we wanted to see them again. They were really helpful and I'd like to thank them. And also thank Sarah. Sarah's done a great job with this gallery and continues to really move this gallery and take it to the next level. And I really appreciate her support for this exhibition and the support and use of this space as we were doing the jurying process. I'm going to take you through a presentation of some of the really interesting things that I've had an opportunity to do and engage with in the last 20-some years, and take you to different parts of the world and different residencies and different exhibitions and things that I've had a part in. So as you can see, my work is focused on place and belonging, and we'll go next to China first. Okay, there we go. And this happened when I was in Eritrea. We were in Eritrea as a family. They brought in a number of artists from China to start working with the art school because they'd been in war for 30 years and they were trying to rejuvenate and rebuild. And one of the artists, who happened to be a printmaker, also happened to speak a little English. And so when he was trying to generate enthusiasm for his course at the art school, nobody understood printmaking or what he was talking about. And so his classes weren't very well attended. So he brought me in to do a couple of workshops and generate some enthusiasm for printmaking. And so we became friends. And when he went back to China, he sent me a postcard and said, "Would you like to come to the Xi'an Academy of Fine Arts and do an exhibition?" And I was like, well, sure, why not? And so that's what we did. And I had a lovely time, really interesting experience in China, and was able to do workshops and work with some of the students. And of course, your exhibition is super well attended because there's like 2,000 students in the art school, and they all show up at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning to see your work, which is really kind of fun. And while I was there, I worked with Professor Jin Baoping and I told him ahead of time, could he collect some work of printmakers, Chinese printmakers, and then we would select an exhibition while I was there, and then I'd bring it back and we'd show it in Canada. And so he'd selected a really fine group of printmakers, and we went through the work, chose the exhibition, and then I brought it back. Now, to travel with artwork between countries is not super easy. So I had all of my work, and it's all well labeled. I had it documented. I had to go out to the airport and get it stamped and get it looked at, and I was traveling with all the right papers, and so I did the same thing with that group. And my hope was when I came back into the country, they wouldn't pay too much attention to the work of the Chinese artists, because theoretically they could have charged me GST up front on all that work, as if it had been sold. And I did not have that kind of thousands of dollars. So I gave them all the paperwork and talked to them all about what I'd done, and they just finally said, oh, it's fine, go. Stamp, 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 and off we went. So I was really pleased about that, because it could have been very scary. And we showed that work at Martha Street next. And then while I was also in China, I worked with Jin Baoping, and then came up with this idea of, why don't we start a annual exhibition and exchange with printmakers around the world. And so the first place we went was into Germany. You can go, yeah, and in Germany, they opened the exhibition on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. And I thought, are you kidding? Nobody is going to show up for this exhibition at all. But no, everybody came. And afterwards, they went into the market and bought their groceries for the day and went home. And it was just like a perfect thing. But I was a little worried. And then Ken Siegel, he was very supportive and showed the work here. And next slide will show us the Manitobans, the first Manitobans who participated in the very first. And we did it for 12 years. I did it for 6, and then a friend of mine from Toronto who had a gallery there, she finished it up. And it was we had artists from all over the world, and what we would do is we'd have contact people in each of the different countries, and they would collect the work from the artists and send us a package. So I'd get 20 pieces from one part of Australia, and 20 pieces from another part, and 15 pieces from somewhere in Europe, and 15 pieces from a place in China, and then another group from Hong Kong, whatever. There was a whole bunch of places that participated. And that way, I would exchange the same number of pieces from artists so that you didn't get your work back, you'd get work from other people around the world. And everybody sent us 2 pieces. We sold one to support the exhibition, and we exchanged the other one and sent them back to the artists. And many of those places then did exhibitions of their work and the exchange pieces. Because if they sent 20 pieces, they would have 40 pieces that they could show. And that was really wonderful and quite successful, and created a lot of enthusiasm and connected artists from all different parts of the world, which I thought was really important. And then I worked on an exhibition that I curated with a woman from Australia and another woman from Germany. And we did this In Your Dreams exhibition. Those are the Canadian artists. I had the pleasure of actually picking the artists, and then luckily they all said yes. And the whole idea was we gave everybody the perimeter of a size of a box. It wasn't very big, but like about a shoebox. And your requirement was that your piece had to fit in that box. It could spill out, the box could be part of it, the box could be just a traveling piece, whatever. And we got the most incredibly interesting, creative, in your dreams pieces from 30 artists, 10 from Germany, 10 from Australia, and 10 from Canada. And then we showed the work. Shirley came with me to Germany. We showed the work in Germany, in 2 places. Then the work was shown in Canada, we gave lectures, which I was also very surprised that lots of people showed up for. It was really quite successful and quite wonderful. And then we showed it at the Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba and your very own MHC Gallery. Oh, and we got some publicity. Okay. And then I was able to go back to China and participate in a really interesting printmaking workshop at the Guanlan printmaking base. The image that you're seeing is an old Hakka village, which is where they created apartments for all the artists to stay. Now, the truth is that they appropriated it from people who actually lived there, which is, difficult. And then there's a history of this village itself. And what was really interesting is there were tiny little windows, and it's all made out of stone and ceramic so that you couldn't burn it down. And if there was any raid that came through in the olden days, they could, shut it up tight. And even on the back door of each apartment, we could pull a bar right straight across the door so that nobody could get in. And the windows were too small for anybody to crawl in, and you couldn't burn it down. So if the men were off and the women and children were in the village, they could all go into the houses and be protected. And so that was the history of the place that you understood as you were actually there and living in the building. But they also took this area and built beautiful new facilities. You, as in China, everything is bigger and better, and they build just wonderful, wonderful things. And in this case, the printmaking facility was really stunning. I really enjoyed working there. I was there for over a month. Different artists came and went, and you had a personal assistant to help you with your work. And I was introduced to silkscreen, which I hadn't done much of, but because I had a couple of techs working for me, I tried a couple of silkscreens, which was really fun. These are some of the images. I borrowed the broom from the woman who was sweeping the street and did a couple of the layers and just gave it back with a little bit of black ink on the tips. And if you go back just one second, while I was there, as I was writing my email, and this was early on when email was just, happening, as I'm writing it, there's lines that went through my text, and it really spooked me. It was like, who is censoring my email? And so that really, affected me, and of course it came out in the work. I did feel watched the whole time I was there. Next, these are the artists that were actually there at the time I was there. They were from other parts of China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and 2 places in Europe. And I was the only North American. But it was a really good time and an excellent way to meet other people and just find out and exchange printmaking ideas, printmaking techniques, and just different cultural exchange. It was really very fascinating. And then Ray Dirks, who was running this gallery previously, he set up an exchange and an exhibition and cultural exchange with Trinidadian artists. So we went to Trinidad for 10 days. Next. And we were tasked to explore our sense of place of where we came from. So I did a video of walking my dog in River Heights because I knew that in Trinidad and Tobago, they would have no idea why you would walk a dog. It would make no sense. So I thought that was a really interesting exploration. These are the artists that were there and that went with us, and we were matched with Trinidadian and Tobagan artists, and were able to do workshops next. And we even got some media attention and got on TV and did cultural activities together as well as the workshops and the exhibition. And then I was sent to Ulahatak up in the high Arctic. Darlene Wright, who used to work she's retired now from the WAG, but she asked me if I'd go up. Ulahatak used to be called Holman, and they had next, they'd closed for 10 years, and she wanted somebody to go up and sort of encourage the printmakers that were still around to get back in and get back involved. So I went up there for 3 weeks. I worked with wonderful artists, but of course, after you've had a 10-year hiatus, people lose connection, people move, people die, like things happen. So it was tricky trying to get, enthusiasm, and I did find a number of printmakers who were really still very interested, which was great. The competition was the knitting. There are a lot of people who wanted to do the knitting, but we did find a core group of artists that I was able to work with, and really enjoyed working with them. The landscape up there is just totally different. It's otherworldly. And you have nothing to judge size by. There's no trees. And you have no idea what distances are. And it's just so different. And while I was there was another group, and they were working with the youth, and they built an igloo, and I was fascinated by the whole process. And I wanted to go. I've never been inside an igloo. So one day before class, I walked out across the bay, and it was in the middle of the bay, to this igloo, and the wind was at my back. So I made it. It was good and cold, but, I made it to the igloo, crawled in, and you really do have to get down and crawl in. And once I got inside, it's wonderful. The sound is muffled. It's warm in there, relatively speaking, and it's just, that's a picture of me inside the igloo after I've walked all the way there. But after about 10 minutes, I had to get back because I have to start teaching. And I crawled out, turned on my video camera that I had around my neck, and started back. And I realized now I'm going into the wind. And I have to go through drifts because I decide I have to go over to the closest house. And as I'm going through, it is tough going. And my video camera conks out at about 2 minutes. It just got too cold, and I'm just struggling to get to that nearest house. But once you get to the house, every one of the houses up there has an entryway, and the doors are always unlocked because in case of a polar bear, in case of a wolf, in case of freezing cold, you can go in and nobody will mind. You just go into the entryway, you warm up, and that's what I did, and then I made it back to the studio, so I was able to teach that morning. But it was quite an experience. That was the hotel. That's the Northern Hotel. And while I was there, there was a wonderful potluck evening, where we got to meet a lot of the other community members, and the artists were there as well. I wrote an article, which fortunately got published, which was really nice. And while I'm there, in the back storeroom, we noticed this contraption. And I asked one of the artists, printmakers, what is it? And they said, just before the whole organization closed down, and this group came up, and they brought this, and they gave us a workshop, and it's an electro-etching machine. And I was like, whoa, I'm not really familiar with this. So I took some time. There was a little manual that came with it. I said, do you remember how it works? He said, well, sort of. And so we went through the manual. We went online and got some information, because I was not that familiar with the process at all. And we figured out how to make it work. And it was really cool. And later on, you'll see, how this was the initial introduction to electro-etching that I'd had. And, later on, I worked really hard on figuring it out. And while I was there, of course, the experience influenced my work. And so some of the prints that I created were directly result of the experience I had in my parka up there in the north. And these were soft ground prints where I actually took parkas and I covered the plates with a soft ground and put the parkas right on there and ran them through the press, took the impression, and then etched that impression into the metal. So, and then these are actual electro-etchings, where I've actually etched the copper with electricity and put them in a copper sulfate and water solution. And these are the results of the electro-etching that I did later, once I figured out the technique even more. And then I showed this work at the gallery in Portage La Prairie. along with the video on the screen. That was the actual video, those 2 minutes of me wondering if I was going to survive. And then I was able to go to the St. Michael's print shop in Newfoundland, another very interesting, wonderful residency, where I was able to work in the studio there for a month. And I was working at this point on a series called The Fabric of Belonging. And again, I was using soft ground and etching, this time on aluminum with copper sulfate and salt. And in some cases, I was doing allumigraphs, which are more they're like a collograph that I cover with a aluminum layer of aluminum, but it is essentially a collograph. That's an actual image of a collograph. And while we're working at the studio, it's right on the harbor in Newfoundland and St. John's, and every once in a while one of these ships would come in and block our view. It was somewhat interesting to watch the tourists, but I loved the view. And then there's a beautiful signal hill where you can crawl up, and you can watch the ships from above come in and out of the harbor. And then I stayed with Pam Hall, the artist from Newfoundland. She rents rooms to the different residents. People come in for the residencies, and it is a lovely little village. Well, not village, it's a town or city, but it's really lovely. Although it's very hilly. It's not so flat as in Manitoba, so you have to get your muscles going. I went to Morocco with a self-directed residency where I was working with a group who were doing primarily print. They were doing printmaking, but a lot of silkscreen. The food was super interesting, and the culture. And while I was there on the rooftop, there was this tiled roof, and I got permission to do some prints on it. And what I was doing is I recorded the airplanes that were going overhead. They were quite high, but you could see what direction they were going. They were going to Europe, back to Africa, to Europe, back to Africa, to Europe, back to Africa. So I was charting which ones were going which direction and then putting them on the roof. Then I actually approached the Manitoba Arts Council and the Winnipeg Arts Council and got some funding to do a couple residencies at Martha Street Studio right here in town. Again, this is now printmaking, but it's also electro-etching. Now that I've been introduced, I want to try it out. So I got myself a couple of tanks from Walmart, and what you're doing is you need to put the plates in parallel and connect the electrical current, and you're running it through copper sulfate and water. And so I had to find a tank that was at least 10 centimeters wide, which I found at Walmart. Since their cereal containers now have little indents, which aren't so good for printmaking. But back then they had some that worked. And then I explored another process with electroetching. I figured, what if I took fabric, dipped it in the copper sulfate, stick it as a sandwich between two copper plates, and then turn on the electrical current. And the positive plate and the negative plate react differently. The next one I'll show you. The one on the right is the positive plate, the one on the left is the negative plate. And that was the direct contact with the material and the electricity. That's at Martha Street Studio. And these were some of the early electro-etchings that I did. I wanted to see if electro-etching would actually be as give you the results, the professional results that you wanted. I wanted to know whether it would do an aquatint, whether it would do a really good line work. And so I did a number of these part of this series just to figure out. And then this will show you very clearly the negative on the right and the positive on the left. In this case, I took a Sharpie and used it as resist, drew the image straight on the copper with a glove because any kind of oil from your fingers would create resist. And then I put them in the bath and attached the electrical current, because I figured when I was learning, I realized that the negative plate was just collecting the metal, and it was just turning black. And I thought, well, why don't I use it for image? And so that's how I experimented and tried that. And so then this whole series that I did that was related to the conservatory that was in Assiniboine Park that they tore down in order to build the Leaf, which was actually a favorite place of mine. The Leaf is also a favorite place. But I spent a lot of time at that conservatory drawing, and I was very sad when they were going to tear it down. So I spent the last 6 months, or 3 to 6 months there drawing regularly, and I drew right on the copper plates, and then I etched them with the negative and the positive, and I created a narrative of what happened to it, and then I used the drawing to talk about my emotional response. And I was using purples and yellow shin collet in the image because those are the colors of bruising. And then in some of them, I actually took the plants and actually pressed them right into the paper and bled their juice and stained the paper with the actual plants. And then I worked out how you could do it with, you didn't even need a power source. All I needed was a AA battery so I could actually teach courses and be mobile. So I did a lot of artists in schools and a lot of programs up north in reserve communities and Flin Flon and, places all over Manitoba. I've seen more of Manitoba than most Manitobans. So it has been very, very interesting to go into these communities. And using that technique, I was able to travel with the work. The group on the right-hand side was from Flin Flon, and then the next one is some of the plates that those Flin Flon students did. So you can move, there we go. And then I was invited to go to Shenzhen University and do a big exhibition in 2013. They have very large galleries, so I had to come up with a fair bit of work and travel with it. This time I had it in a big tube and put it on the plane as a oversized piece of luggage. It's always scary when you see it go down that chute, and you hope you're going to see it when you get to the other side, because if you arrive and your exhibition doesn't, it hasn't happened, but I don't know what you do. They've printed a catalog, which was really nice of them. And this is some of the work that I was doing. In this case, I had been back to the Congo, which I've only got back once. I grew up in the Congo as a child, and one time I was able to get back at the right week when the political situation was calm enough. And I used the dress that I wore as a child that my grandmother would send me. She'd send me these little nylon dresses. And so I used that image in this whole series. And it was all printmaking. And it was just, part of it was the concept of how out of place my little nylon dress was in the jungle. I would wear it mostly on Sundays with the little patent leather shoes and the little white bobby socks. But it was also a special tie with my family in North America. And also I did a lot of talk in this series about, I was revisiting some of the trauma from childhood, because it was an idyllic childhood in many ways, but the political situation was volatile, and we did have to flee several times. And this is the little suitcase that my brother and I, you can see how big it is by the pencil. This is the suitcase my brother and I shared. We had 20 minutes to put in our valuable toys before we had to leave. And when people are fleeing now from the fires, it reminds me very much of that kind of experience. And in this case, my brother put in his little toy animals from his barn. We were 8 and 10 at the time. And he had to leave his barn behind because it was too big to fit in the car. And I put in some clothes for my special doll that I'd had since he was born. And I couldn't take my doll because it was too big. So we both had something to remember, but we also were both reminded about what we lost in what we took. So again, it reminds me when people are making these decisions and they're leaving and it's a fire and they don't know if they're going to go back and their house is going to be there or not. Because when we came back, things were gone, like it was destroyed. And then Pat Bovey, who was working at the Buehler Gallery at the time before Leona, and she curated my work with Michael Boss, and we did a whole exhibition on identity, and she curated some of my parkas into the exhibition and some of the dresses. And she's put together a book, wrote a book on Western voices in Canadian art, and included my piece on that, which was really, I appreciated that. I've also been up to the Deep Bay residency in Manitoba, up at Clear Lake, and that's a really quite wonderful experience. You get to stay in this lovely cottage, and there's a little shed out back, which I turned into my studio for the messy work, and inside there's a lovely table where I did some of the research, and I was doing more research again on my experience in the Congo, and I did a whole series of rubbings while I was there. Rubbings from the plates that I'd been using with the prints, and I also organized a film, which I then had a friend of mine whose daughter was 10 years old actually participate in writing the text for me for the film. But I worked on it at this residency, and I did a lot of experimenting with the letter. I found letters that I wrote to my grandmother about a month before we had to flee. And it was interesting for me to just look back and see the letters and see what I wrote and what I didn't write. And because you felt the tension, you felt the unsettledness, you knew that things were not going really well, but you're also just living your life as a 10-year-old. And of course, we did a talk at Poor Michael's, which is always fun. And then I discovered that there was a chap in the Canary Islands who knew the most about electroetching and had written a book, and I had been using his book to figure out my residency at the Martha Street. And so I went and signed up for the workshop and met Alfonso Crugero, and it was really quite wonderful. He knew so much. And I learned so much while I was there. And he built an incredible electroetching facility. And one thing that was super interesting in his contraption that he made for electroetching, the one thing that you have to worry about is evaporation. Your copper sulfate and water are stable. They don't degrade. You can keep using them forever. But the water evaporates. So he had this ingenious idea of putting ping pong balls on top of the water. You can put your plate in and out, no problem. But the water doesn't evaporate nearly as fast. It was really cool. I just thought that was very cool and ingenious. That's the book that he wrote. If you're at all interested in electroetching, you should get that one. And this is the residency. That's the view from the residency, and on the right, that's the actual little the studio and the apartment that you stay in when you go. And this is how you get there. The little road down the escarpment. Yep. And what was really interesting is Alfonso and his wife had a whole group of friends, and every weekend they would go out hiking on Saturday. They would hike for 3 hours and eat for 3 hours. It was my perfect, Saturday recreation. It was really, really wonderful. So I got to go out with them several times and thoroughly enjoyed it. Every time they had a whole different trip planned, different part of the island. It was really, really cool. But I did break my wrist. Luckily, it was the very end of the residency, not in the beginning, and luckily it was my left, not the right. Yeah, oh well. And this is some of the vegetation, another of the prints that I made while I was there, and some of the other prints that I was working with. All of these are on copper. And then I was lucky enough to get a residency in Ubud, Bali. It was just the best. I saw this image online about this residency. I said, I've got to go. Like, this is my place. And so I applied and got in, and the Manitoba Arts Council funded me, and I went. And it was really, really amazing. Literally, the room was right in the rainforest. All the windows looked out onto the forest, and where I worked was right on the edge of the forest, open air. There's a roof and 3 sides, but one side's open right into the forest. And that was fabulous. Now, there was a resident cat who really loved me and my work. And sometimes that was a great idea. And when I was working on Tyvek, it was fine. But when I was working on the nylon, not so good. So I'd had to chase them off. And I was able to take some workshops with local Balinese artists and also go investigate sustainable collection of dyes, which was also super interesting. And I was connected with a local artist, Kenyam, through a Canadian artist who lives in Malaysia, who was part of a group in Chicago that I connected to online during the pandemic. And so when I said to the group I was going to Bali, he says, "Oh, I know this great artist there," and because he knew my work as well, because online we've been sharing our work during the pandemic, and he connected me. So when I got there, I met Kenyam, and it was just before Earth Day in April, and in 2 weeks we put together an exhibition and put it up online. And Corey J. Etienne helped me with the technical things, and we got it online, and it was very cool. And then I got to workshop the actual fabric installation that, if you were here at my exhibition that was just came down, it was here, and this is where I first was able to workshop it. And I also, the first time I was doing really large work, and right there in the rainforest, right on site. And I was able to get into the rainforest, above the rainforest, and really experience the rainforest and be able to draw and be right in there in the moment. And the work that I'd done that you saw here, which I was able to do that part for the Bali section. And then I went to Guanajuato in Mexico, did an encaustic calligraph printmaking workshop. I was just absolutely intrigued by the idea that, you could use wax and run it through a press and it wouldn't disintegrate. The food that was part of this was incredible. The artists that were involved in teaching, Elise Wagner from Washington State, and Hugo did his art training in Washington as well, but he's lives in Mexico and runs the bed and breakfast that we were involved in, and is also a printmaker. And on the roof is where the printmaking facility was. These were some of the experiments I did using wax and making prints, which were really fascinating to me because I had no idea that you could do that. If anybody's actually interested in a workshop like this, she does painting encaustic workshops as well as printmaking, and totally interesting. After the workshop was finished, we rented a car and went into the Sierra Gorda Biosphere Reserve and went to a cloud forest. First time I've ever been in a cloud forest, and that was absolutely fascinating to me. We stayed in an indigenous village way up in a high elevation. The vegetation was amazing. It was a very basic eco kind of tourism where we didn't have any hot water or electricity or internet or cell service, and it was pretty cold. So when the 2 women from the village came to make a supper, we just wandered into the kitchen with them and kept warm. There was this really fascinating place down in the tropical jungle this artist, Edward James, had inherited a fair bit of cash from his family, and he spent his life doing eccentric things, and one of them was to develop this estate, and he basically employed the village there for their lifetime, doing all of these crazy building projects. It was actually fascinating. Got to draw there. And then this is the exhibition that I just had here. Many of you have probably seen it. And that's the fabric installation on the right, where I workshopped in Bali. And then some of the large pieces, of course, the experience of doing the large pieces in Bali really helped with actually creating this. It gave me confidence to actually do the large pieces. They're 4 by 8 feet. And that's just some details of the fabric installation. And I loved giving tours. I had the most fun in that exhibition. I was given tours. Anytime anybody wanted a tour, I was showing up and giving tours. It was really, really fun. And those are the large 4 by 8 feet pieces. And of course, I drew in the rainforest there as this was based on the Kakamega rainforest in Kenya. There were 4 rainforests in the actual exhibition. And this rainforest was the one that I was most familiar with because it was very much like the one I grew up in. And these are a couple of pieces. I decided to focus the exhibition on the beauty and the wonder of the rainforest, but I didn't want to ignore the dire predictions that it may not exist in 50 years. So I included a ghost tree in all the different images. And so I was able to go to the Hoh Rainforest on the west coast in Washington State, and also to the rainforest in Bali, part of the residency, and then the Sierra Gorda Biosphere in Mexico, and then back to the Kakamega Forest in Kenya. I also went to high school in Kenya, so I was familiar with the Kenya landscape as well. And then I included a community participatory project within the exhibition, and I had these leaves made by women in the slums in Nairobi, because my sister-in-law works with women, and they made all these beautiful leaves. I worked on the prototype with the woman that was there in charge, and put them on the wall, and then offered people the opportunity to take a paper leaf that I'd cut out and write on it something they're doing to save the forests, and then exchange it for the cloth one and take the cloth one home to remind themselves of their commitment, and also to create a wall of hope as the exhibition went along of all these things. Each little thing that an individual is doing, you think, oh, it's so small. But when you put it together with all the other people who are doing something, then it feels like we're really making progress. And that was what was creating hope with that. And of course, I get to show you my granddaughter. I'm not allowed to post any pictures online. So you get to see her at the exhibition. She came in her beautiful pink dress and her little unicorn slippers with her stuffy. But she couldn't figure out why Grandma couldn't spend time with her that night. I was talking to so many people, and, well, I brought her back another weekend, and we had a lot of fun. So thank you so much. And I've got, I brought some cards and some digital prints if you're interested, and I also have a list over there if you'd like to sign with your name and your email. If you want to be on my art adventure list, I send out newsletters a couple of times a year with lots of pictures and all about the adventures that I'm on. So if you're interested, just put your name and your email on that, and I will put you on the newsletter list. And there's also a set of gift cards, and a set of 4 in little gift boxes, which I've got as a special, was part of the exhibition. We held those over just for you guys tonight. All right, thank you so much.